I am a partner with TPG Growth and super excited to be here with everyone today talking about two of my favorite things, actually three of my favorite things, which is investing in cool companies, working with other women, and candy, because who doesn't love candy? And so I'm excited today to give you guys a little bit of an overview about our investment recently in Smart Sweets. I'm hoping a lot of people here eat it, and if you haven't, please definitely go out and pick up a pack. You can buy it almost anywhere you would buy better for you groceries, including Amazon and the company's website. And then later, I'm going to be joined by Tara Bosch, who is the founder of Smart Sweets and someone I've gotten to know very well and have an incredible amount of respect for, and who's become a friend over time of doing this investment. So just to kick off, I will say Smart Sweets has been one of the most exciting deals in a long history of consumer investing for me. I've had about a 20-year career working with consumer products companies. So probably similar to a lot of you or what a lot of you are going to be doing. I started out working in investment banking, again, with consumer companies, went back to business school to Kellogg, and then moved on to a couple of different private equity firms, starting with Thoma Bravo, then on to Swander Pace, and then most recently to TPG, where I lead the consumer, retail, and restaurant group for the Growth Fund. And previous companies I've worked with will include some names, hopefully that you've known and eaten or tried or put on your bodies or homes at some point in time. So including Renew Life, which is a probiotics business that we sold to Clorox, J.R. Watkins, which is natural home products and personal care, Glow Skin Beauty, which is premium professional skincare, Pine Ridge Bakery, which is a supplier of muffins and cookies to McDonald's and Tim Hortons, and that was definitely fun to try as well. Aiden and Ane, which are very soft baby products, Fender Guitars, Phil's Coffee and Mendocino Farms, and Smart Sweets today. Smart Sweets represented kind of a confluence of some guiding principles that I have, as well as what TPG has, which are three things. One, building excellent businesses and generating great returns for our LPs and shareholders. But two, putting better products in the hands of consumers. This is a really strong core belief for me. I had a son that was born 3 months early, and learned a whole lot really quickly about having a house that didn't have chemicals and bad things in it. And so shifted very quickly to a lifestyle of clean products, both inside my body, but also outside it and around the house. And so as investors, I think we have a duty to try to give consumers those same great types of products. And then lastly, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are things that we care a lot about cultivating both inside TPG, but also with our portfolio companies, and things that I deeply care about as well. And so I've got a strong mission personally to back diverse founders and try to grow their involvement in the consumer products industry. Within our consumer products group at TPG, we invest thematically. So what that means is about every 6 months or so, or as often as we feel the world changing, we get together as a team and think about different themes or different trends that are happening to consumers. And that'll be between 4 and 6 different things going on. So it could be consumer-centric health and wellness, like consumers taking back the reins on their healthcare versus doctors or experts telling us what to do. And one of the themes that we've been thinking about for a long time is better for you indulgence. So I'm sure it's not lost on anyone here that the grocery store over the last 5 to 7 years has gotten dramatically cleaned up. We've seen crackers, cookies, soups, even all kinds of things, paper towels, for heaven's sakes, start to have clean ingredient labels that are exactly all the things we talked about, putting better hands in the products of consumers. And one of the very last areas in the grocery store or drugstore or wherever you want to shop that's gotten cleaned up is the candy aisle. And I'm sure if anyone here has taken a walk down the candy aisle, and not to pick on CVS because I think it's a great merchant, but down the aisle of CVS in recent months, especially Halloween, you'll see that a lot hasn't changed since we were little kids. And so because of that, it's been a mission of ours to try to figure out a way to innovate within candy and help drive improvement for consumers everywhere there who still want to indulge and enjoy something sweet. And the biggest area of innovation in candy, I believe, is around sugar. Sugar obviously has led to an epidemic of obesity and heart disease and other sorts of horrible things all over the world. And if we can do anything we can to change that, we should. And candy is again, one of the last places where it hasn't really changed. And so as we started researching that led us to Smart Sweets. And we recognized that not only was it a great high growth business, but it was doing the right thing in terms of creating candy products that all kinds of people can enjoy healthily. And, as we got to know the team, we found out that there are a lot of other things going right there. An amazing management team led by Tara, who you'll meet later, as well as an incredible group of people that she built around her, all of whom are young, energized, and driven to build, a huge company that was going to change the lives of lots of different consumers. But what was interesting too is when we put our financial or our investor hats on, the company had a very, very strong growth and financial profile. And I think that's interesting because when you look at the world of exciting high growth brands, those things don't often connect. We'll often see companies that have very popular brands that consumers have really connected with, or we'll see companies that have very strong gross margins and great EBITDA. But oftentimes those two things are not connected, because what happens is on the high growth brand side, companies oftentimes invest so heavily in driving growth, either in lowering price to make more people buy the product, or in investing in marketing, that the overall financial profile of the business doesn't end up looking great for a long period of time. But Tara and her team really believed in their mission and believed that they had a great product that they could charge a premium but still affordable price for, and that they could drive growth in without excessive marketing spend. And so they did that. And so we have today a company that's well over 100 million in revenue, growing at close to 200%, with very strong, industry best in class gross margins based on other companies that we've seen in the space. And it produces a very, very healthy EBITDA margin and strong free cash flow conversion. So for us as investors, we felt like there was the strength of brand, but there was also the financial profile to fall back on. And that was something that was really interesting to us. The company also, as large as it had gotten, which was over 100 million in revenue, still had so many growth levers that we were excited to chase. And so one of the interesting things about building a company of the scale that SmartSuites is that most of the times people do that through SKU proliferation or just creating a lot of different products. SmartSuites did it through 6 products, and they ended up selling the products at a very high velocity. So the turns of the products through the doors of retailers was faster than almost all of its peers. In fact, in Target, we have the #1 turning or fastest growing SKU there, even faster than some of our non sort of better for you competitors who've had a stranglehold on the category for a really long time. In fact, actually, what was interesting is when we saw that, we started digging in and doing consumer research and asking, consumers via surveys and panels and all kinds of things, how they were actually eating SmartSuites. And what we came to find out was that almost a third of the people that purchase SmartSuites treat it like a snack. They look at the ingredient panel and they say 3 grams of sugar, 10 plus grams of fiber, low net carbs. This is actually pretty similar to eating a bar or a handful, even in some cases, of nuts with some sort of topping on them, or certainly better in some cases than eating a piece of fruit. And so start to eat this product on a daily basis, which drives those high, frequently recurring purchases. But against that high velocity, because that had built such a large business, the company hadn't had to expand distribution to the ends of the earth. And so there's still quite a bit of white space left for us in terms of totally new retailers to expand into, and in terms of additional SKUs within our lineup that we can put into retailers that we already have a relationship with. And then lastly, there's so much room for innovation with the business, and that's what we're really excited about. So far, we're just in gummy SKUs. So we have peach rings, Swedish fish, sour gummies, traditional fruity gummies, but there's so much more to go in terms of other sort of non-chocolate candy. And then eventually down the road, chocolate is certainly something we're thinking about as well. So there's a lot of room to go as we continue to take over the candy industry and try to put better products in people's hands. The other interesting thing, and this always appeals to us as an investor, was SmartSuites wasn't perfect. It was pretty darn close. It's one of those things where you look at it and you say, I haven't seen a company that looks this good in a really long time. But there were still areas where we felt as an investor that we might be able to add value and be a good partner to the business. And that's with the continuing recruiting and build out of the team. And so right now we're working on a few sort of senior level positions within the company, where we think we can attract some best in class talent of people that want to be part of our mission. We also felt as though the company, just given its age, it was 4 years old at the time, had a really good supply chain, but there are always things that can be improved and scaled as the company continues to grow to sort of set it up for 200 million in revenue and 300 million in revenue. And that's kind of one of the areas that we're working on the company with as well. And then lastly, putting in continued safeguards and sort of the right rails around regulatory and product development to make sure that as we add new SKUs to the company, we show the continued same degree of care that the company's had to date around making sure that all of our products meet CFIA and FDA regulations. So all in all, felt like this was just one of a kind company. We knew it when we saw it, and that led us to rush quickly to get the company a pretty firm finalized offer at a very, what we felt, attractive price, and make sure that we could finish our acquisition or our investment very quickly. We got to know Tara and the team along the way and felt like we would be great partners and friends with this crew and be able to spend a lot of time with them over the coming years. One of the final things about this opportunity that I just really found to be so interesting on a personal note, tying back to those original core three principles that we talked about, was Tara and the team's commitment to diversity within the company. The business is 80% women right now. It is, of course, women founded and women owned, had a woman CEO. Tara is transitioning into the full-time role of founder. She'll be with the company 100% of the time, but she's going to be shifting into the things that she really knows how to do well and loves and is super enthusiastic about, which is product development, engaging with the consumer, engaging with our marketing efforts and things like that. We've brought in a new CEO who is a guy, but he's a very talented gentleman that I've actually worked with before at another prior portfolio company called Vortman Cookies, which was also sort of a better for you product company based in Canada. But one commitment we made was to make sure, we wrote this into the shareholders agreement. Tara and I mutually agreed that the business at all times would maintain a board of directors that was at a minimum 50% women. So we have that in the shareholders agreement, and that's always going to be a piece of the legacy of the company. And we hope to bring in other independent directors who have never sat in a board before. Because I'm sure, as all of you are aware, one of the challenges with getting women onto boards is the assumption by a board of directors that women needed to have already been on a board. And it's a very chicken or egg situation. And we view ourselves as a platform to be able to bring people who are certainly board ready and have great skills that they can add to a board, into a board environment to kind of launch that part of their career. So that's what we'll be doing going forward. And then finally, our goals for the business, and Tara can talk a lot more about this, but we have a lot of goals for the business in terms of growth and scale. Certainly would like to be past 200 million in sales in the next couple of years. And we are definitely on a path to do it. But most of all, it's just get better products into the hands of consumers around the world and continue to kick sugar so that families can have kind of better diets, all around. And so we're really, really excited about the potential for this investment and cannot wait to see where it goes from here. So with that, I'll pause because I'm guessing there may be some questions just about how the deal got done or what's going on with the company. And I'll do my best to answer them, but just know we have the real expert coming very shortly, and she'll be a fantastic person to chat to about this. So it looks like we have one question here, which is asking about what trends that we're seeing in the plant-based food space and how we gauge the consumer's change in mindset to switch to such products. And it's such a great question. And actually you hit on a quality of Smart Sweets that I didn't touch on already, which is that we're actually one of the few, or maybe the only sort of chew and gummy business that offers plant-based SKUs. In fact, the majority of our SKUs are plant-based. So many gummy products actually stem from bovine gelatin and that kind of thing. And so this is a great option for people who are vegans, but still want to indulge in gummy candies. We are seeing, an overwhelming amount of flight to plant-based foods, especially with consumers under the age of 35. Certainly it's happening with consumers over 35, but based on our data and just anecdotal evidence, we're sort of seeing a much bigger trend towards that with Gen Z and millennials. And so we're very excited about that opportunity. I think what we're seeing, what comes with it is an ability or sort of a lack of nervousness around buying premium products. So a little bit less price sensitive consumer. And it's not to say that consumer necessarily has more money in their budget to buy these products. It's just that consumer is willing to shift more of their wallet share towards buying plant-based products because they care so deeply about doing it. And they're aware that they can still get great nutritional value from it. So we think there's even more to come. I'm sure everyone saw McDonald's announcement today that they're going to be adding a plant-based protein to their menu as well. And so we're excited. If McDonald's is doing that, I think the world has a lot more to see ahead of us, and we're excited about where it could be in the coming years. Just received another question asking if we would mind sharing any of our current investment theses that we're exploring, and absolutely. This is one of our favorite topics. Love talking about this. And in fact, we have a team, we're in the phase of our planning for next year where we're working through kind of what our 2021 themes will be as we start up. I will say things changed a lot with coronavirus and things are starting to kind of go back to normal now as we're starting to see the world settle. But we believe that there's certain behaviors that have changed permanently in consumers. And so that's driving some of our views. One of the things that we're seeing is just this increased, it was already a piece of our theme, but this increased focus on efficacy in personal care and in vitamins, minerals, and supplements. So I think prior to coronavirus, people were looking for the cleanest, simplest possible label. And there's still definitely a cohort of consumers that are doing that. But we're now seeing a lot of consumers that are saying, we just want something that works. So whether it's a consumer that's buying Clorox wipes or whether it's a consumer that's purchasing vitamins, that are science-backed, highly efficacious, and highly technical, which we're seeing a huge growth in that sector of nutrition. That's something that we're seeing as a big theme in consumer as well right now. We're also sort of seeing a lot around kind of just the way food goes to the consumer. So, prior to COVID, certainly food service was actually tipped over and became 52% of all food sales. So prior to kind of 2020, food at home would have been the bigger piece of the market. And of course, heading into 2020, food service kind of tipped over and people eating out of the home was greater. Obviously, that's tipped back. But what's happened with that is that consumers are starting to buy even more prepared food. And where we see a hole in the market is around clean label prepared food. So if you look at the perimeter of the store, that food has a short shelf life. And one of the ways that oftentimes retailers or purveyors of prepared foods to grocery stores extend shelf life is through preservatives. But a lot of new manufacturing technologies are emerging, as well as sort of natural preservatives are being discovered in the ingredients world. And so we're starting to see folks who are creating prepared foods that go to the perimeter of the store that still are clean label and follow the same sort of food principles that people are looking for in center of the store products. So those are things that, those are a couple of the themes that we're really digging into as well. I would say one other one that we're really looking at is sort of holistic health and wellness. So that's the combination of beauty and vitamins and vitamin minerals and supplements together. So whether that's a vitamin brand that's launching topicals that are vitamin based, for example, brands that are probiotic based that are in the skincare space, or going the other way around, which are beauty products that are launching vitamin products that follow their same principles of, say, anti-inflammation or things along those lines. So those are all areas where we're spending a lot of time. Another question from the group is just, what is the market like in the snack industry? Is it crowded? How is Smart Sweets able to override its competition? It's one of the more interesting market structures. It's one of the last few market structures in the US food industry that's just dominated by really two strategics, Mars and Hershey. There's others, of course, that play in it in a smaller way, and other, sort of non-US based companies that export product into the US market, but it is largely Mars and Hershey that dominate it. And those are very large companies. And, one of the questions that we got in diligence was, why isn't someone knocking off Smart Sweets? Why aren't Mars and Hershey like creating the exact same product? And in every time we've seen this case where, two incumbents share the bulk of the market share, what it generally leads to is a lack of innovation in the category because they don't have to. The focus is largely on retaining that market share and driving free cash flow, which is exactly what those guys have been doing for a long time. The other interesting complicating factor that I think slowed down sort of copycat products by large strategics with a lot of marketing dollars for Smart Sweets is COVID. Frankly, with coronavirus, launching into the US in sort of the spring, a lot of the innovation labs in this country shut down. And smart R&D scientists and the folks that were going to create sort of the innovations for some of the larger strategics couldn't go to work. They couldn't be in the lab. They couldn't be creating products. And so we actually have a hypothesis that new innovation by strategics, as well as copycat innovation by strategics, is going to be slowed down for sort of the next 12 months or so until those labs are sort of up and running at full speed again and have full capacity inside of them. So that gives us a little bit more of an unplanned window, frankly, that we weren't counting on to be able to sort of hold our beachhead with our product in that market. I think one of the other questions I got here is the product distributed only through specialized stores or also to mass merchandisers? It's a great question as well, because given the price point, you would look at it and think it only goes through specialty stores. And in fact, the product did start in the natural channel and the specialty channel, but quickly expanded to Target, Amazon, and most recently Walmart. And it's actually doing really, really well in Walmart. So I think that's an interesting answer that, again, goes back to this point we were talking about earlier with plant-based foods, but I think also pertains to clean label products, which is consumers are willing to shift their wallet share, even if it's a household income or a household that has income called under $75,000, where you typically don't see purchases of premium items. We are seeing it in this type of food as consumers say, hey, I'll give up something else in order to be able to feed my family or feed myself, something that's clean label or sort of has these better for you attributes like lower sugar, for example. So we are now seeing a lot of success in terms of velocity in mass merchandisers, and that's a big piece of our strategy going forward. Really good question here about the consumer industry, and it's seeming like a competitive space to be in. True, it's very competitive. The question is, when looking at potential investments, what makes a company stand out, and what are the biggest red flags? It's a really good question. And the answer is, it's really hard to know. I mean, it's really hard to know at first glance what makes a company stand out. I think the reason people are successful in consumer investing is because they know the right kind of diligence to do. And that is very granular, very category specific diligence. In consumer in particular, we do layer upon layer of diligence to really understand what makes a product excellent. And some of those things are, we start with usually a consumer survey with a pretty big sample, so call it 2,500 plus people. And we execute that survey to find out, how people view the product we care about versus its peers and versus substitutes. And what we're looking for there in particular is either a high net promoter score or a very high degree of loyalty versus peers or substitutes for the product we care about, but then coupled with low product awareness. And if we see that, that makes us feel as though, hey, there's still a lot more consumers to penetrate who don't know about this product or haven't tried it. But chances are they're going to love it just as much as kind of this first cohort that has very strong loyalty to the consumer and really loves the product. The second layer of diligence we do, honestly, is taste testing. And while some of that is us sitting around eating the product, a lot of that is actually external taste testing. So we do hire groups to have blinded panels of consumers to try our product or the product that we're interested in versus peers again, to sort of see how it stacks up on a very blinded basis. And if we aren't scoring in the top three there, then it tells us the product, on a consistent basis, that tells us the product is not a true crowd pleaser. And that's actually something that's really important. That's the thing that to me is sort of the prime differentiator between what products are showing growth because of marketing and what products are showing growth because people just genuinely love them. The last piece of diligence we do is actually a very scientific one where we look at what is in the ingredient panel, like what you're actually reading versus what is in the product. So you'd be surprised how many products out there, what is actually being sold and shipped to the consumer is not exactly what's in the panel. And that leads to two things. One, eventually having to change the formulation of the product, which is always a little bit tricky. And two, it leads to regulatory issues, which can create terrible marketing and terrible sort of blowback on the brand and cause a lot of problems for investors. So I think knowing those three things, and there's some other things I'm not quite giving away right now, but those are kind of the three pieces of diligence that are at the core of sort of how we know that a product is really truly differentiated and how we feel like we can lean into it from an investment standpoint. And that helps sort of weed out some of the situations where it may feel very competitive with other investors looking at it, but we might be able to see something that someone else doesn't. A good question here, a couple good questions kind of coming in around sort of successful founders and talking through CEO transitions, which I think will be an awesome transition into Tara joining us. So a really good question. What are the common traits of successful founders of companies that you partner with? I think that is an excellent one because I certainly have learned a lot over the years. I've learned a lot from great founders. I've learned a lot about things to watch out for when we're thinking about a potential partner. The number one lesson I've learned is just time. You've got to spend a lot of time with these guys and not get caught up in how great the business is, because it's a little bit like dating someone. They can be amazing on paper, but if it doesn't work out when you're sitting down and having a conversation, it's not going to work out for the long haul. And so don't try to force it, is kind of how I would approach it. You've got to have kind of a chemistry and a shared set of values and beliefs. And you have to sort of want the same things within a certain degree for the business. A great example is sometimes we'll look at companies that are a direct to consumer business, and we'll see a lot of growth potential by taking that product into wholesale, because that's still, to this day, about 85% of the way that consumers shop, even with increased market share taken by D2C post-COVID. People are still shopping a lot in stores in some way, shape, or another. We might look at one of those companies and the founder may have a view to build 100 of their own standalone retail stores, which is a very different approach and a very different financial model than kind of how we're thinking about it. That's never going to integrate well. And it's never going to work to try to change that founder's mind when they're already way down that path. And so even if the brand is fantastic and the business financials look really good, that's just something where we may just have a difference of opinion that we're never going to bridge the gap on. And so I think that shared set of vision, that shared set of values around what we want to do with the business is super important. I think the last piece is, within some degree, a shared view on valuation. So we will run across founders a lot of times who, for various different reasons, and nothing is good or bad about this particular view, but may have a view where they want an extremely high valuation for a business, and they know that the business is not necessarily worth that based on current financial metrics. And in fact, in order to get there, they're willing to do some sort of crazy structure with, high liquidation preference or giving up warrants at certain thresholds down the road. Sometimes that works, but those are the outliers when that works. If you're taking the path of what's going to most frequently work, it's something where you have within some zone a shared view on valuation. If you're $300 million or $400 million or $500 million apart in valuation and you're trying to bridge that gap, through an aggressive structure, that leads to a lot of angst down the road when it comes time to exit, unless everything goes perfectly. So those are all things that we are looking for in sort of a meeting of the minds with founders. Another great question actually about best practices when it comes to handling CEO transitions, and sort of Tara's rationale for it. And I think on Tara, certainly best to let her talk directly about it. And we've, she's very open and upfront about this and has been with her company and has been with us. And I think it's honestly absolutely very traditional reasons for doing it, which is just wanting to focus more on the things that she absolutely loves and knows she's really good at inside the business. As the company scales, as any company scales, and I always say, for consumer products companies between about 100 million in revenue and 150 million in revenue, there's a great deal of supply chain intensity that occurs then. And no matter how quick of a grower a business is, no matter how beloved a brand is, that is the time period where operations get very complex very quickly and have to be handled by people who just absolutely love operations, or else it can sort of bring a business to its knees. And what I mean by that is you can have deliveries that aren't on time or deliveries that aren't right to the company or to its warehouse, and that results in stockouts at key customers. If you fall below a certain on-time percentage at Target or Walmart for a certain amount of time, no matter how great your brand is performing, they will throw you out. And so based on that, we think it's really important to have, kind of everyone on the management team aligned around a very holistic view of the business. And Tara was rightfully so to raise her hand and say, I love product innovation. I'm so good at that. And she is. She's one of the best in the world at that. She knows her consumer better than anybody. She's absolutely incredible at marketing. And that's where she really wants to spend her time. And so we've brought in a CEO who loves sort of a more holistic view of the business, including, loving to dig into supply chain and operations. And that's his history. And so together they make an excellent team of founder and CEO. And I'm sure will be the right couple to kind of take this business into the future, on that regard. So let's see, a couple more. We'll wait until Tara gets here. I love this question. What financial metrics were specifically attractive in SmartSuite's financial statements? So it's first about the financial metrics in the statements, but also about the sell-through metrics of the company. So the financial metrics that we liked, obviously revenue growth. I think the other thing too was, getting really granular nerdy here, looking at the delta between gross revenue and net revenue in the business. The company had been able to grow itself without a disproportionately large amount of trade spend. So we look at a lot between that conversion between gross and net to kind of make sure that for the category and for the channels the business is in, the company is either under indexing or right on the nose in terms of trade spend. And that's where SmartSuites was. We looked at gross margin for the type of business that SmartSuites is. We would expect to see a fully loaded gross margin of 40% or higher, and the company was well above that, which speaks to the fact it has the right pricing architecture and is sourcing product the right way. And again, back to my previous statement, also has the right level of trade spend. We look to see that the company is achieving its growth levels with the right amount of marketing efficiency. So, again, looking to sort of, it depends on the company and age and all of that good stuff, so there's not a rule of thumb here in particular, but I can say that for where SmartSuites was, we felt like they were actually growing faster than they should be for the amount of marketing spend, sort of below gross margin marketing spend that they had. And then lastly, EBITDA margin is always the best indicator because, you can look at that and that's sort of too high of an EBITDA margin and you realize the company is probably starving itself. Too low of an EBITDA margin, it's not a good business model. And SmartSuites was perfect on that front as well. So I'll put it this way, well into the double digits in terms of an EBITDA percentage margin. The other things that we really care about, again, are back to these statistics around sell-through. So, we're looking for a high growth rate and an increasing growth rate in terms of sell-through over the last 12 and 52 weeks. So over the last quarter and over the last year, across not only the entire business, but across each of the top 10 key retailers. And we get that data by buying Nielsen or SPINS data and looking at that. We also are looking at unit velocity. So trying to understand how many units per door per week are being sold for the product. And is that increasing versus kind of what it was doing a year ago for each retailer, but also versus against peers. So we're trying to understand, is SmartSuite selling through more units per door per week than, Haribo or other competitors? We also are looking at ACV, which is sort of a metric or a similar sort of a bellwether for us to look at penetration. You want the company to have some penetration, but you do not want it to be so fully penetrated that you're like, my only option here is to go to some far-flung country and sell it there. And so SmartSuites had plenty of penetration left in the US and enough velocity to tell us that, again, it would probably do well as we continue to expand into other US retailers, but not so much penetration that we felt like we were just out of room to grow in the US or in North America. And here she is. So I will pause there because I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Tara Bosch, who is the founder of Smart Sweets, an incredible entrepreneur, a wonderful human who has such great stories to tell you guys about how she built this business and where we're going now. And I will turn it over to Tara to introduce herself and go from here. Hey, I think you're still on mute. Sorry.
There we go.
There we go. Awesome. Hey, Tara.
Zoom life. Hey, happy Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's super, super excited to be able to be part of this. So thanks everyone who's on the call for joining, and always fun to tag team with Heather and partner up. And happy to and excited to share about Smart Sweets journey and our mission to kick sugar and the partnership we have with TPG, and Heather is leading that, which is just going to take our mission to new heights that it hasn't reached yet. And so, if it's helpful, maybe I'll start with just kind of how we got started in existing in the world, and how we got to where we are now and partnering with TPG, which is a massive milestone for us. So I loved candy growing up. I was a candy addict, but all of the sugar from the candy didn't make me feel great. And so I stopped having candy, which was like my favorite thing ever in the world. And then my grandma, who's like my best friend, she had shared with me that she regretted having so much sugar over the years as well, specifically from candy, which was something that we had enjoyed so much together growing up. And that was really shocking to hear, because I was like, wow, well, why can't you feel good about candy? So that really inspired the thought of, okay, well, this needs to exist in the world, and ultimately me deciding to embark on a mission to kick sugar and keep candy. So I got a gummy bear mold online, began recipe testing in my kitchen. It was in a basement suite at the time, and smoke, because candy is such high temperature cooking, would be going up through the windows into my landlord's apartments, and they thought I was doing something sketchy, but certainly not trying to make sugar candy. And then made the decision to drop out of college to really pursue bringing Smart Sweets to life with everything I had, and the vision really, which was and still is, to become the global leader in revolutionizing candy, and ultimately also a leader in the global sugar reduction movement as a result of that. So I dropped out of college, I went all in recipe testing and bringing Smart Sweets to life. And just under a year later from there, we launched across Canada initially on store shelves. And so fast forward 4 years, this is our fourth fiscal year and fourth full year existing in the world. And we are to date in 25,000 stores across Canada and the US. And we have a squad of just over 50 incredible humans. We call our team our squad. And really, what the squad works so hard to bring to life every day is taking the candy that people know and love and reinventing it without all of the sugar. So we really take the candy classics and bring it back as something you can enjoy and feel good about. So some of our products that have invented or reinvented some of those classics has been our sweet fish, our sour blast buddies, our peach rings, most recently our sour melon slices, which is our take on watermelon slices. And we do something called an impact report, which is basically taking collectively our revenues and translating that into, okay, how much sugar have we helped actually kick in the world, and what impact have we held? And our impact report this year, we helped people kick over 1 billion grams of sugar, which is for sure our most meaningful milestone to date. And I think the most exciting thing for us is that it feels like we're truly just getting started on this mission to kick sugar, and that's why it made so much sense to partner with TPG, and how we partnered in finding humans who not only just are good humans and that we have the team has such strong chemistry with, but really had the shared vision alignment, the experience, and the resources to really amplify what we're doing in the world and accelerate the pace at which we can execute, and ultimately bringing our vision to life and helping more and more people kick sugar. So yeah, that is kind of the nutshell, Cole's notes of the Smart Suite story.
Awesome. Well, I was getting some questions that I will throw your way because I was like, this is for Tara. But there were some really good questions around. I mean, I think it'd be interesting. People were curious about, competition in the industry. And I was talking a little bit about how Mars and Hershey were just like absolutely dominant. But I'm curious, maybe one angle also to talk about too, because I don't know them quite as well as you do, but some of the up and comers who've come in and tried to do something similar to Smart Suites, sort of how you guys have, or how we, I guess, have managed to fend them off, and sort of how you think about that, and just for entrepreneurs who are starting a business, sort of how they would think about that.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just gonna rotate because I can see that I'm a little dark. There we go.
Zoom problems.
Zoom problems. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thought on competition has always been it's not an if, it's a when. And so there's certainly in the past year have been several different startups that have popped up and trying to really create a product that's like Smart Suites. And I think what we really focus on is being wildly authentic in all that we do. And so Smart Suites started genuinely because I loved candy and my grandma loved candy, and we just wanted to find something where we could enjoy it. And the authenticity I've learned, you can create a product, but you can't create a brand in a short period of time, and you cannot replicate authenticity. And so that's been really powerful because in addition to the innovation we create in the world, we're radically obsessed with fostering our community and having real-time conversations with our consumers. And that's something that has served us really well. But also just from a competition standpoint as well, always thinking of just being 5 steps ahead. So someone else is working on gummy bears, then we're already working on creating the go-to kick sugar destination for all of your favorite gummy candies, and are moving into new types and formats. So also just being really aggressive from that perspective is kind of the approach we've taken.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's working really well. So plus our candy turns like crazy. We were talking about velocity earlier, and I was like, velocity. One question I think people have a lot of thoughts around, and I actually would love to hear this too. I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, but I'm sure when I've met the team you've got today, and they're all wonderful, and I was raving about them earlier. But I met you when your business was 4 years old, and I'm guessing that there were some people there at the beginning of the business that aren't there now. And so, how does that? I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about, as an entrepreneur, as your business scales, how you think about bringing in new people when you do it, and also how you have tough conversations with some of the people who were there with you from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think through the lens of Smart Suites journey, one thing that I tried to be really honest about was what do I suck at, and not in a self-deprecating way, but just in like a way of just being really honest with yourself. Where it's like, okay, this is the vision that we want to achieve. This is the time and space in which we want to achieve it, and what knowledge and experience do I not have that we're going to need to have in order to get there. And so that was a really helpful question to ask myself because it allowed me to be super honest both about how I serve the business best, which in the beginning was printing the labels, packing the boxes, doing everything. And then as we grew and brought on people that filled out different gaps. But I think one thing that was also really helpful, especially I think in building a company for the first time, for me at least, was having advisors. So I had an informal advisory board with 2 amazing humans on it, Judy Brooks and Eric Patel. And that was absolutely invaluable because it was two people who weren't in the day-to-day of the business but knew enough about the business in order to be able to see around the bend, and they had been down the paths before, and so could identify gaps before I even had the foresight to see them. And so an example of that was we had just finished our um, first full fiscal year, and we had done 2.2 million, and one of our advisors was like, I think it's the right time to bring on someone leading finance. I absolutely suck at finance, and it was one of my massive weaknesses. And I, in my mind initially, I was like, really, like that's so early. But then in pausing, it absolutely helped us because it gave us the discipline of putting the correct systems and processes in place to be really disciplined with our numbers early on. And so that's just one example, but served me really well. And I think having the hard conversations, geez, I mean,
Hate hard conversations. Nobody likes them. It's so bad.
I almost feel like, I mean, I feel like I'm still learning how to have hard conversations. And
I
I
know, and I'm like double your age, and I'm still doing it. It doesn't get easier.
yeah, well, yeah, I feel like it's like a muscle that like you just have, and at least for me, it doesn't get easier every time. But I think that along the way, I've learned as well. I think from pushing off hard conversations too long, that it's actually easier to have a hard conversation than not, and these different thoughts or feelings develop under the surface. It just becomes so much larger. It takes so much more energy than it would have. And so that's one thing that's been really helpful, I found, and has also just served relationships better, I think, because I think people can sense when something's off or when you're feeling something and it's not being authentic to them or yourself.
I think it's so true. And by the way, this is the second time in the conversation that we're like working in a company or investing or running one is so similar to real life, especially dating, honestly. Like you just know when something's off. um, well, I mean, that kind of raises it touches on another question that has come up a few times here. And I think it's actually a really interesting one and that's what's been one of your biggest challenges. I mean, is it that or is it something else as an entrepreneur here with Smart Suites?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like through different parts of the journey, like different things have felt challenging. For example, in the beginning, the largest challenge was just like getting retailers and manufacturers to take us seriously and take the leap of faith. And as we've grown, different challenges have become the larger ones. But I think the biggest challenge, I think, throughout the journey, for me personally, has been just managing my own psychology, and I think just the the tenacity of acknowledging, okay, this feels really really hard, and I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but we're going to figure it out, and just putting one foot in front of the other, and then also leaning on the team, the squad, the people that are so much smarter than you or should be smarter than you. I think if you're finding the right people to help solve those problems, I think that's ultimately been the biggest challenge. Again, I guess through the lens of at the time being a young entrepreneur was my first go at it, and also being a solo founder,
Yeah.
and finding those outlets.
Yeah. Who were your confidants along the way? Was it your advisory board or did you, I mean, when you were kind of like, oh man, this problem is just, or this is getting overwhelming, what kind of support system did you have?
Yeah, I think on like the business front of kind of like the actual like business challenges of like, okay, how do we scale this? How do we sort this out? How do we prepare for this? The informal advisory board was super helpful because
Mhm.
what I found was I felt really grateful to be meeting these folks who were like, like pick up the phone anytime you want to call me. And that was helpful, but they didn't have the context when I'd call them all the time. So they could give me really powerful insight and advice, but it wasn't necessarily always applicable to Smart Suites. Whereas these two informal advisors, and then being closer to the business, and we set up a structure where we were meeting monthly, reviewing, kind of having like informal board meetings. So they knew enough about the business. They had the context where they could kind of just dive into really sharing like specific informed advice. And then I think on the kind of like mental aspect of entrepreneurship. I think it's in, especially in US and Canada now, there are just so many resources like accelerator programs, incubator programs, where for me, I was really fortunate to be able to take part in, and it gave me this peer group. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, like there are other people going through the same things in their day-to-day life. It's really like comforting when you're like, oh, okay, I'm sitting next to you and you're crying today and I'll be crying tomorrow. And just like that sense of camaraderie from a peer perspective was also really meaningful.
Yeah. One of the questions, and I know a little bit about this, but I think this is one of the coolest things about you. Well, there's many cool things, but a question I'm getting is, how did you find the informal advisory board? And I know one story about you cold emailing someone on LinkedIn who I know was on your regular board, not your advisory board. But maybe for those in the crowd who are building their own businesses, I think it'd be interesting to hear how you devised, kind of that crew of people.
Yeah. I feel like for me, I think especially in like the very beginning where I knew virtually like nobody in the food world and had no contacts, I think being bold in reaching out to people, but doing it in a way where you're honoring their time and have a very specific ask, and really respect that served me really well. And so I would reach out to people on LinkedIn and I'd be like, hey, like I really admire what you've built. This is what I'm building. I would really like 5 minutes of your time to discuss XYZ would mean the world. And I'd love to send you some smart tweets. And what I found was that people were really willing to not only help in that way, but then also I would make sure to loop back and say, hey, I applied your advice and this is what it meant for my business. And so they knew that their time was valued and that I took the advice and applied it. That was really, really helpful and led to some really meaningful mentor relationships. And then the two people on the actual advisory board, I feel like is kind of was kind of just serendipity. I suppose I found the more and kind of doing those micro things and reaching out to people kind of led to just serendipitous things. In this case, one of the members who I met, they were doing this reality show of raising, and someone reached out to me and was like, would you want to pitch on this show? And in the spirit of like always saying yes to and embracing the opportunities as they come, especially when they scare you. And that one certainly did. I was like, sure, why not? So I met him through that. And then the other one I met through a pitch competition. So kind of serendipitously, but actively reaching out to people and trying to seize opportunities, I think also led to those moments.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. I was, it was incredible, kind of who you had around you. I mean, you guys were all incredible, but then you'd attracted this great career. So it just really, you could see that one of the things that really jumped out to us as investors was just the humility all around, sort of saying like exactly what you said earlier, which is like, I know a lot of things and I'm good at a lot of things, but there's a lot of things I don't know or I'm not as good at. And like, who can I bring around me that's the very best? And that's always the sign of a really great founder and a really great company. So along those lines of meeting people, one of the questions that has come up a little bit is sort of, how does someone break in terms of meeting buyers and in terms of meeting retailers? Like, how the heck do you get a new product into a store?
I mean, I can only speak through the lens of my journey, but it was like banging the freaking wall down. was kind of like nobody wants to give you the time of day. Nobody answers the phone calls. Nobody answers the LinkedIn messages. Nobody answers the emails. If you go to the store, they're too busy. But what I learned was like, okay, these people aren't giving me their time and they're not doing it because they don't like me or my product. They're just really, really busy. So how do I get the 5 seconds of attention that they're going to understand I'm creating a radical value for their store? So I shifted my focus to really trying to be really concise in translating in like 5 seconds or less. This is how I'm going to create value and incremental value to your store shelf. In my case, Smart Sweets being a premium product, they're making more penny profit off there. It's a higher ring. There's so much benefits for them, and it's not cannibalizing their sugar set. It's just incremental. And so I that's really how I kind of ended up getting the first and second and then third retailer that snowballed. But also doing creative things like the Whole Foods Canada store manager in the West. I know he likes beer from creeping his Facebook and Instagram. So I sent him a subject title being like free beer. And he opened it and he responded. And so also getting, I think, creative, but being persistent because some of the retailers, I was reaching out to them on email every other day for like 2 months before they got back to me. And it's not because they don't like you or the product, it's just because they're really busy. Um, and creating authentic value for their set. Like, why should they give you the time of day? Why should they put you on their shelf?
Hmm. Did you have to do a lot of education around low sugar, or were they actively looking for that kind of a solution for the candy aisle?
Yeah, it was really interesting because I feel like they weren't looking for a solution, and many of them didn't necessarily think that it could exist in new ways. And so I think many of the kind of leap of faith that the buyers took was kind of purely off of like, okay, I'll give this a shot. It's like the economics of it are beneficial enough for me, but I don't think the value proposition is really what was enabling them to like take a leap of faith,
Mhm.
which was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And it's amazing how far it's come, like even in, a few years. And I think Smart Suites actually created, I mean, in a way, it created kind of that subcategory, or created the mission around it. And I mean, I guess, when you think about the future for the company, how far, I mean, how far do we think the low sugar kind of attitude, or sort of palette can go with the American consumer? Like, do you see it in being sort of the way Oreos are for Americans in the next 5 years, or kind of what's your head on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like kind of two thoughts come to mind, like low sugar or not, taste is king, and then also low sugar is not a trend; it's here to stay. And so I think what's really cool is like kind of the sugar reduction movement across all categories that's happening. I think it's also paralleling to normalize with consumers, like, oh, this can be low sugar, and oh, this can also taste great. And so, yeah, I mean, with Smart Suites, there's really no reason why Smart Suites can't and shouldn't be the kind of fast forward to 5 to 10 years from now when someone thinks that they want candy, they think of Smart Sweets, and they kind of have like the synonymous association with candy to Smart Sweets, like Kleenex has the tissue and like Oreos does to those cookies with the cream in it.
Yeah, exactly. I know, and now even they're trying to clean those up, which is a good thing to see. So, um, so I mean, I think that brings us to kind of the great, kind of the end of this. But I mean, how do you think about sort of the next chapter for? How do you think about this chapter sort of coming to sort of the next conclusion? I mean, it's never final, but do you see Smart Suites? We've had a lot of questions today about SPACs and going public, and Mars and Hershey and things like that, and sort of how you think about the next home for Smart Suites. And I know we never really know, but I'm kind of, I think everyone's curious where you would like to sort of see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the cool things I think about the partnership with TPG and you, Heather, is like you guys are like you guys are Einsteins at all the different avenues, and and I feel like the really cool thing about Smart Suites is that the possibilities are limitless. There's nothing that we can't do as we and what it's always been about for me and why it was such an easy decision to partner with TPG is has been just tying it back to, okay, it's 5 years, it's 10 years, it's 30 years from now. Smart Sweets is the global brand in kicking sugar. And what different partnerships along the way are going to help us to accelerate that becoming a reality. And so I feel like it's really hard to say because things change so fast nowadays. It's like in 6 months, in 3 months, in 9 months, in a year, things can be so radically different. So one path that might seem like a path that would make sense today, in a year from now or 2 years from now, might actually not be the best for actualizing our vision. And so, so yeah, I guess that's kind of my thought on it is that like we're like super relentlessly focused on bringing to life the vision and whatever partnership makes the most sense at that fork in the road. I feel like we'll only be able to know at that fork in the road, but um, Yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts, Heather?
No, I think it's similar. I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting with the emergence of SPACs and the popularity in the last 6 months is interesting, but who knows where that'll be in the next 6 months or the next year. And I think the premise, I think we've always believed at TPG, and I've always believed as an investor, is just great. Don't worry about the exit. Like a great business will take care of itself. Like I've never had an issue achieving a return from an investment on a great business. Like it just happens. Like everybody wants to be a part of it. And I think the exit is an output. The input for me is getting this product to as many people as possible because
Mhm.
that will do everything. And so what's good for the business ends up being good for all of our shareholders. And so, I mean, not to sound, general about it, but I think that's exactly how I feel about it. It will take care of itself. So I can't wait to see what happens. So that'll be good.
Ditto.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today and hope you guys have a great rest of the conference. And certainly feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or other things if you guys have any questions.
Yeah. Have an amazing conference, and thanks so much for your time and joining the Kick Sugar chat today.
Bye, Smart Sweets. Bye, everyone.